Good morning, everybody. Welcome to TLDCast Thursday. Happy to have everyone here. Let's see who we've got in our block. We've got Jackie and Kristen's in the background. Oh, Quetzal's going to be in too. Looks like Quetzal made it in. Mahua, Rebecca, thank you all so much for coming in this morning. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. What are some things you wish you had known before becoming an instructional designer? It's something that I've had on my list for a while to have the community discuss, and I'm super excited to have our guests here today and possibly a couple more. We would have Kristen possibly jumping on, and then Quetzal as well. So good morning, everybody. And Valary, Jonathan, Rubina, thank you so much for coming in. And so we're going to start with Valary Oleinik, and she's going to tell us what are some things she wish she had known before becoming an instructional designer. And everybody, feel free to just pipe in chat, and and even Jonathan and Rubina, if you've got anything to contribute, feel free to jump in.
And if you need to boot me so Quetzal can jump in, looks like he's got to go at 8:30, so
okay,
you can swap us out.
Okay, absolutely, thanks. Cool. So what do you think, Valary?
Yeah, so I'll get started and work fast because we got a lot of people. Well, I was saying that, I've been doing this so long that there weren't groups like this when I got started. And, it would have been great to have known who to go to. I mean, it just, that was one of my big things at the beginning, was just sort of, I was in this little island unto myself and sort of figuring things out. And so I'm so grateful to have groups like this and to be, part of groups like this now. So you all just are so lucky to have this. But one of my big ones was also about people that I think we all gravitate toward what's easy for us or what we like. And so I came from a creative background, so sort of the creative aspects of it and the learning aspects I was familiar with, and I love tech. So that part was easy, but like getting to know people and building the relationships was what was hard for me, and sort of stepping outside of the little instructional bubble. I was okay while I was doing that, but we often talk about how people don't understand what we do, and we don't get credit, we don't get a seat at the table, all those things. But we have to take some responsibility for that. Like, we can't just sit back and make great things and expect the world, to find us and then welcome us in and whatever. So I would have spent a lot more time building relationships with the management. All of my experience was in workplace learning. I wasn't in academia, so I would have spent more time with building that rapport with managers in various departments that were, related to this, the HR people, the IT people, the whoever. And then also, I think that the other side of the people part for me was, then you kind of have to accept that a lot of this is out of your control. That you can build and you can put your heart and soul into it, and you can build the perfect, wonderfully, instructionally sound product. But, it really, if it doesn't meet the learner's needs, like if you don't really understand them, and that's the other thing, a lot of times we don't get access to the learners. A lot of times it's some manager comes to you and says, build me training for this new application, and you don't ever get to talk to, and that's really unfortunate. And I think, I would have pushed harder. I have that option now, but I would have pushed harder if I had known, I would have built better things for the learners. And it also would have gotten me more buy-in probably from management, because I would have had the relationships. So there was all these little people pieces that I was really missing, I think, at the beginning. So
were there any strategies that you were able to use to actually build relationships with HR and IT and all those other teams?
I think part of it, I got lucky. I had a couple of managers who were super supportive of learning. They were actually almost too supportive, if that even makes sense, because I think sometimes they were sort of all in on the learning for learning's sake and not always tying it back to the business needs. And that is something I still struggle with a couple of them about. I'm like, okay, but why are we doing this? Because my original degree was in management. And so I was like, you gotta, there has to be a reason. We're a department that costs money. we're never going to make the company money. The best we can do is save them money. Mm-hmm. And so how can we make this most effective and useful and that? So I basically just made an annoyance of myself probably by I kept talking at people. I kept like saying, hey, can we talk about this? Can we how's that working? IT was hard to break into. No offense to the gentleman here, but it was the boys club and they were not real big on the girls coming and telling them anything. Yeah. And it's a little better now, but but really it was just kind of, I just kept reaching, I kept trying basically. It's like, and kept looking at what worked or didn't work, and then tried to go back and say, well, hey, this really worked, or this didn't work, and could we try something different? And really it's just a gradual process of, just like you build relationships, I think, with any of your coworkers. And if you can show those little successes, I always go for the small, don't go for the big firework show necessarily. Like if you can find those little wins, you can find one champion that will then help you to kind of, take up the cause with you and maybe further the cause a little bit and get them, they'll go talk to somebody else and they tell two friends, that kind of old kind of viral marketing, basically, like get a couple of people that'll kind of plead your case. And I think that really helps. So
is this like a constant struggle for you, or is it something that you've kind of worked through and now you sort of have a pattern of that can lead you to success?
I mean, it's constant in that, you're constantly dealing with new people. It's not, I work in a firm right now where there are a lot of people that are very long tenured, but there's always new people coming in, and then there's changing needs and just how the technology changed the way everybody works. So you still have to keep navigating it. It's you build those solid core people, I think, in your sort of group that you can go to when you need to, and you're also selective about it. That was the other thing, especially with IT. I found that you only get so many chips to play. And you hold on to them, and you do, and they know there's certain people in that department, at the director level, even, like, they know if I come, like, it's like, I don't waste that. I don't waste their time. I don't, be respectful of their time, and I don't just come in with every little thing. Like, save your cards, save your chips for those like really when you need to play them, because they'll appreciate that, and you'll usually get better results, particularly as you're talking about moving, trying to convince people higher up the food chain, so to speak, the C-suite people and everything. But it really is about trust. I convinced really high level people in our firm to take some risks on certain projects because I sort of built that trust, and they're kind of like, okay, well, but they also knew that I would own it. I wasn't ever going to like blame somebody else if it didn't work. I wasn't going to turn around and go, oh, well, if you'd given me more resources, oh, well, if I'd had more time. Well, if I'm pitching it, it's mine, and I gotta own it.
That's awesome.
All the way through. So.
Wow. This is great stuff. Thank you so much, Valary. I think you have some more. You have a few more things, right?
Oh yeah. I mentioned that at the beginning, and again, because I was, in space, like alone, basically. And I felt like I had to prove myself constantly because it was this new world, and they didn't know that I didn't know what I was doing at times, because I was kind of in this space. I was a trainer before I did the designing part. And it was kind of like, I always just had to stay one step ahead of them. So as long as I was one step ahead, like they never caught on that I like didn't know what I didn't know sometimes. But I always was trying to build like final products, and that I would not do. And now I don't do that anymore, obviously. I've learned from myself. But yeah, doing those like minimal viable products, doing prototyping, doing more things. And as I said, now I have more access to the learners directly. Whenever possible, I want to talk to them. I don't want to talk to the manager, and all of those things. So that helped me, really get it to the learners quicker and say, okay, this is kind of what we're thinking. Like, am I missing something here? Is there some pain point that, what's the hardest part of your job? And like, what do we need to help you with, kind of thing. And then the other one was just, ironically, now I'm in the project management role. So obviously I learned this lesson. I learned how to say no to people, because initially it was kind of, everybody would bring me everything like, oh, can you make a training for this? Can you make a training for that? And whether it was a training issue or not, and identifying that some of these things are not training issues, some of these things are management issues, or they're, procedural or whatever. They're not always training issues. And I took on things that I should not have taken on. And then I also let projects kind of, morph into, sort of mutate into larger things that I shouldn't have. Like, they started out one thing and then like, oh, that's working. Can we just kind of add this and this and this? And you end up with a product that, while it might be okay, it's not as good as it would have been if we'd had a much clearer picture at the beginning of where we were going,
Valerie,
instead of kind of wandering.
Do you think that kind of scope creep might come partly from wanting to impress a manager that may or may not know what's good versus bad about what you create? I was wondering when you were talking about that, wanting to impress, but like, I think that a lot of people are in my situation too, where they're maybe doing something for a group that's not focused on that. Like, I'm a trainer in quality. Mm-hmm. Sounds like you kind of had the same thing going, where you had a skill set and stuff and you're like trying to impress your boss, but I don't know, did they know about what you were doing? Or
yeah, I mean, I think they knew. I think it was more we didn't separate projects that probably should have been separate things. It was just kind of, this is working, so let's just kind of add on to that. Or let's one big project that I worked on, we had an initial audience that we were working with, and the project turned out to be hugely successful. And so then we have offices around the world. So we were focused on our New York office initially, but then other offices started saying, oh, we want that course. And then another department that wasn't originally part of the scope of the project said they wanted in. And so like adding these different people in like started to cause problems, because we didn't design for those learners. Yeah. We designed, but then we tried to kind of accommodate, and then and then nobody ends up with the best thing. So, and I'm not reading the chat, but I should be. I can tell.
No, they're getting me back for all the times I've been so off topic.
Yeah.
Now, how hard was it? The ability to say no, was that something that was really difficult for you to like figure that out?
A little bit, because again, initially when you're starting out and you're kind of insecure and you know there's a lot you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so you're not sure where the boundary is. You're not always sure, like, is this something I should be doing? Is this not something I should be doing? I don't really know where I don't really know where no hits, like where, how far can I go without? And so, yeah, I think a lot of that's just experience. Unfortunately, you can't, there's nobody that can tell you that. And each environment, each company is different. Each project is different. And so, yeah, you just kind of, a lot of it is just, you got to feel your way through it. So
we're all laughing in agreement because we're all experiencing the same pains every time we work on a project. So yes, yeah. Sure. Very resonant.
Right. Yeah, I just figured I'd be the spokesperson for it.
It feels a lot better to say no. Like, you think yes is going to feel good, but it feels really good to say no.
It does.
To watch everybody else's hopes and dreams for your time die on their face.
Yes. Well, it's called setting boundaries.
That's right.
Limits. And I always trying to put the positive spin on everything I have to say no to. Like, oh, that's a great idea. We're going to do that in the next training. That's a wonderful thing that you've come up with. That's great. We're almost finished with this. Mm-hmm. Remember, there was a budget. We're not going to blow it. And then when you start talking about dollars and numbers, and then they start remembering, oh yeah, that's right. And so it is a lot of wearing hats as an instructional designer. And I think I was going to say that the one thing that I didn't know is how many hats we actually do put on. And sometimes it feels like too many or not the right one, or you're just not sure. Again, with what Valerie was saying with, you just don't know what you don't know sometimes. And where are the boundaries of your role? where do you draw your lines? Where do you draw your limits? Where do you suggest things that need to go into a course or a learning or a training or, whatever your intervention is? Are you the right person to do it? Should you do it? Should you not do it? Because, oh my gosh, now you're going to add so much work on your plate. Or take it away if you realize this really shouldn't go into this course, and I probably should say something because it's not the best thing to put in here right now. Although then the project will then get limited and finite. But it is what it is. So yeah, you always have to juggle those boundaries.
What kind of hats have you had to wear, Rubina?
Very, very similar to what Valary was saying about project management and things like that. I didn't even come from that background. I came from an education background, but picked up some management things on the way, which were just, they're part of your toolkit. You need it. Even if you're not applying it to yourself, if you have a project manager, sometimes the project manager doesn't know how to apply it to you in the best manner. I've had that experience. So it's good to know a little bit of project management if you want to do really well in instructional design. And that's not something that really is given to you initially, I think. I think it's something you pick up over time, and scope and budget, and how many weeks are we going to devote to this, and how many weeks is too many weeks, or how many hours is too many hours, how much creativity and design can you put in given those confines or not put in, or then how do you scale down just so that you're like, oh no, now the deadline is about 3 days away. Okay, so what can I do in 3 days to finish this? And maybe we're not going to put in the elephant today. We're going to hold the elephant till another time. And so
sometimes you got to kill your darlings. It's
yes.
The part that you're most proud of, and it's like, this has to go.
Yes. But and then that's another thing of instructional designers. You can't. You kind of feel married to your creativity and your passion and your drive, but you have to remember it's not your baby. And yeah, it's not your baby. And I say that all the time. I'm like, oh, and the text comes out I thought were really good. And I'm like, okay, fine. And you take
I think sometimes the babies go and sit in the nursery for a while. Like they don't necessarily get, they might get killed, but they don't get buried.
Later,
save them for.
Look at that. I made that a few months ago, and we didn't put that in. Oh my gosh, it's now relevant. We can actually dust this off and clean this up and put this in somewhere else.
Unless it was Old Yeller, as Cara is pointing out.
Oh no.
Old Yeller needs to be taken out back. That's brutal.
That is brutal.
True sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep going through your list, Rubina. This is great.
Yeah, so I did have a nice list of stuff. Who to turn to for support. Oh my gosh. In-house is crazy sometimes. I mean, you want to have people who are champions for you and management that supports you, and your employer, your boss, whoever that may be, whether it's your manager or not, you want them to support you. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's uphill battle. Sometimes it's trying to get them to get on board, and you have to be persuasive. Yeah. And that's another hat. Like you're playing a marketing hat for this training, or parts of a training to say, you really need to say this way, or present this content this way, so that the learner is really understanding what you're trying to say clearly enough. You get it because you know this field. They don't get it because they have no idea. So so a lot of that happens. And who do you turn to for support? In-house, it's again building relationships and building rapport, and knowing who to turn to, when to turn to, who not to turn to as well too. So if you have those folks that are really not interested, then you start pulling out into other resources. And then sometimes you go outside the company and you go to your cohort like TLDC or your friends in instructional design, and you build up your core of supporters, and then you start just talking like, oh my gosh, I've got this project and I have this thing and I have this problem and I'm not sure what to do. Sure enough, somebody else is going through the exact same experience as you. And they'll say, oh yeah, I face that same thing and I hate it. So at least you'll get the validity first, which is nice. And then you'll get some recommendations, hopefully enough. And so I always do, if I'm really, really in a bind and I've tried, my toolkit of stuff, then I reach out and ask, and the world actually replies. So there are good people in the world, and there's good supporters, and somebody always has something that they can help you out with too. So you don't feel isolated on that island too much. Yeah. Scope creep is always a thing on my list. And I've gotten better at that, of saying, great idea, use it later. It was not easy the first few courses, my earlier versions of ID versus where I am now. Now I can spot the scope creep when it starts happening, which is so great for me. I'm like, oh yeah, that's scope creep. I identify that. Okay, we're gonna have a conversation about that. So
identify scope creep. I mean, is that something that's even possible to
identify? I think so. When you have if you're building design well, properly, and following your standards and practices, your best practices, then you will see that, because you've already scoped your project out. You've got your outline, you've got your sketches, you've got your storyboard, you're using your authoring tools and whatnot. And at some point, someone says, hey, wouldn't it be great if, can we add this in? Yeah. And then when you hear that, you start digging, okay, now there's a multitude of possibilities here. We can entertain this or we cannot, depending upon X, Y, and Z. Do we have the budget for this? Do we have the time for this? Do we have, the resources for this? If yes, then we can start going in this direction. And if not, then you start the boundaries and like Valary said, you put the baby in the nursery and then let it pacify and whatnot. And then maybe later, this is something for another time. Yeah, I've gotten better at spotting it, because if you don't spot it, you get railroaded very quickly.
Yeah, watching for those red flags. I'm sure that's something that people definitely do not understand, that they're going to potentially have to deal with.
The worst scope creep is at the end. Like, you've been working with one creator. Like, I had a project. One of the first things I did when I got a rapid authoring software, she was building something in PowerPoint, but she was trying to make it into an e-learning, and I had just gotten Storyline 2 license, and I was like, maybe I can help you. And it was a personal protective equipment course, and she had actually one of the guys that worked there would come on the screen in like a little paper doll thing where you had to choose the right protective outfits for him to wear and stuff. Okay. She'd already done all the graphics and everything. I just had to make it actually work. And it took me months, and I got it done, and she loved it. And then she's like, okay, well, now we got to get it past these guys. And they were like, hey, this is great, except that's not the type of PPE for this situation. And can you change this? And can you change that? And like, they were the ones adding the scope creep. And then it got past them. There was another level of approval and one beyond that. And that was one of my early lessons, was make sure you get everybody on board with the storyboard ahead of time. Get them all to sign off and agree. Yes. So you can say, you told me this was good. So that you don't wind up building something and then having to tear it apart. And because I felt like I'd built a cathedral and they wanted me to rearrange pillars in the basement. Yeah, I was like,
that's true.
That's a good one.
That's a good visual. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Cool. And you got any other ones, Rubina?
Let's see here. Time management, Valary already touched upon. That I also, identify with too. You can be building things to the point of you're way over your time and stuff, and you've got to make sure that good is good enough. I've gotten to a point where good is good enough. And if it takes longer than a certain length of time, depending upon what it is I'm making. So if it's a design art thing, it might be a different time limit versus trying to figure out the right content to say that might be a different time limit for me, like mentally. And the more you do it, the more you grow, the more you learn, the more you start applying that layer of management technique on top of yourself. And you're like, okay, this is taking a lot longer than I thought it was going to. That's when you start saying, okay, how do I make this easier? How to make it quicker? How do I make it nicer? And then just be done. And good is good enough. And then
Rebecca said good is not always the enemy of great. I think that's
yes, it is. What questions are you asking your SME? Always. I know we learn lots of basics and things like that and 101 and whatnot. They don't know that. The SMEs don't know that, and they don't agree and they don't comply. And the first time I worked on a training for a SME that wanted this course, and they're like this the whole time. Like I come into the room and we're having this meeting and discussion, and I'm like, I'm here to service you. I'm just like a deer in the headlights, like very naive. And I'm like, I thought they wanted this course. I thought they were going to love this course and this concept and whatnot. Oh, they don't even want to deal with me. Okay, great. But midway through the design, I started getting some buy-in and some support and reaching out to them and showing them some things that I was creating because they had not seen it before and they had no idea what we were visualizing. It was something new and innovative, and they just weren't sure what things were going to look like. And then they got on board. Then they started answering questions, and so I'm like, okay, I didn't get this question answered in my design meeting. However, through the design, I can go back to them. And now I started those processes where if I didn't get every question answered during the design meeting, that's fine. I can do it iteratively along the process, along the way. And that keeps me building rapport with them, building relationship with them, and then kind of on track so that at the end, it's not like, oh, we didn't know what that was. They know exactly what it is at the end too. And so then I get the approval a little bit better or sooner or faster.
Yeah.
So that was
cool.
Thanks.
All right, cool. Should we move on to J-Rock here?
All right.
He's got some good stuff.
So, and I've already told the rest of the panel I'm correctable on this. If you guys need to put me in my place, I recognize that. I'm ready for the fight. But the first was not so controversial. The first thing I'd tell myself if I could jump back in time is that content is easier than attendance. One of the first things I had to do was put together a new employee orientation, and I was so worried that we'd get the right content. We had to have environmental health and safety. We had to have good manufacturing practices, corporate overview, site overview, operational excellence, and all this stuff. I was so focused on getting it all in there in a week-long course, getting all my instructors. That was a breeze compared to just getting my students in there on time, because I needed to get their buy-in, I needed to get their managers, and then if the production schedule changed, I work in a manufacturing facility, I was finding myself frequently, like it was always on a Monday, on the Friday before, emailing all the managers saying, are you sure I can have so-and-so? Oh no, we switched them to third shift or whatever. And there was a couple times where we have our site leader actually comes down and delivers part of the new employee orientation. And so it has to have at least 6 people or it's not worth it. And I had one where he came down, busy guy. His time is important. And I had a roster full of people who were supposed to be there and nobody showed up. And so I was like, I am done with this. So sometimes you got to get a little bit mad before you get assertive. So, but, it got me thinking, okay, what's a good solution? And so I'd say for that kind of stuff, I would say it's okay to put stuff on other people. The solution that I came up with was I forwarded the invite to all of the supervisors that had direct reports. And I said, all right, you guys, and I got some time at their leadership meeting and pitched it to them and said, you guys, when you bring somebody on board, because you're the first one that knows when they pass their background check and stuff, it's up to you to forward this invite to them. Mm-hmm. Not the whole recurring one, but just the one instance you want them to go to. And then it's up to you to make sure that they have time in their schedule And it took a lot off of me running around at the last minute. I could know who's going to be there and who's not. So I could know in advance whether we needed to cancel the class or not. So that was part of it.
That's great.
So I would have said, spend more time than you think you need to setting up the system, and not as much on content. Second thing is, if a trainer needs to back out on you at the last minute, don't be like the accommodating guy that's going to go, okay, put it on them to find the replacement and say, you're allowed to get out of this if you've got somebody that's your backup, because I firmly believe there's no success without a successor. So whatever we're doing, we should be looking for who's the person that, if I want to take a vacation, can fill in for me and that kind of thing. So I think that kind of goes to some of the things that have already been shared about being more assertive and strategic with our time and with who actually needs to make some of the decisions and stuff. So that was the easy one. I didn't get too much pushback yet, so we'll see how this next one goes. On my screen, you guys are like right here and here, so straighten me out if I need it. But my number 2 point is, ain't no shame in starting out. And I say do the things that are fun for you at first. When I started, I was the only one here. I didn't have any role models or anything like that, trying to figure out what I needed to do. And you go online and you see things like, the Serious Learning Manifesto and don't commit clicky, clicky, bling, bling. And we hit a bunch of don'ts right up front. And I say, do the don'ts first. Get them out of your system. Have fun now. Cringe later. And you probably will cringe. But think of yourself as the first student. You would give any of your learners time and patience, and you'd be looking for the little triggers and hooks that make it fun for them. So when you're starting out, keep it fun for you. Put the clicky, clicky, bling, bling in. You're going to annoy your future self. That's okay. You want to have something you can share with the community when you're like, oh, you can't believe what I made. But nurture the interest level you have in this stuff, because otherwise you won't be able to stick with it either. If every idea you have, you come up with 10 reasons why it's bad or could go wrong. So that's the one I expect to take heat from, is to commit all the sins up front and make the stuff. Because maybe building a complete click next locked down time course, maybe that you get proud that first one you make. You're like, I have made an e-learning. You don't think I committed an atrocity. You will later. You'll feel that way, but.
True.
But make it and be proud of it. And then maybe the next thing, maybe there's one thing, instead of just having this 12 bulleted paragraph of indigestible info dump, maybe have something animated in there, just little steps, stuff that sustains your joy and interest in it, and then get better. That's kind of my take on it. So I'm ready for my weapon if you guys want to set me straight.
I like the way he says it. I think I would just say, know the rules. So that you can apply them and then break them gently.
Well, you will learn them quicker if you break them first.
Well, and sometimes you can have the fun in private. You don't have to always publish it all. We've all made. Come on, you're learning when you're learning how to use new tools and stuff. You make some goopy thing and that's okay. Because as you said, I think it's a good point. I think it keeps asking you the questions as to, why is this bad? Why is this good? Why is this, whatever. And so, see, I'm not going to pile on this one. Ain't no shame. Getting the t-shirt. Ain't no shame.
I'm just laughing because I just did this yesterday. So I was making a Beyond animation, and the character's like, huh? And I'm like, oh God, this is so dorky and ridiculous. And I'm just making myself laugh. And I'm like, oh God, that would be awful if I published it this way. This is really funny. I'm going to totally annoy everybody. And so, you just don't publish. But
even sometimes I've published bloopers. I've published bloopers because sometimes that also, I think that makes it more human. And then people want to learn from humans, even if we're learning through screens. And so I think sometimes, so that's why another reason I'm not piling on. It's I think it's okay to leave some of those things in occasionally, as long as it's clear, okay, this is haha, that was funny. It's not something that affects them learning the content, but, has a little fun. You got to have a little fun with it.
I would love to put together some kind of a compendium of, first sort of e-learning projects.
Oh yeah, man. like the awkward family photos of e-learning.
I know, like years ago, my first attempt was Captivate. If I think of those now, I would just be like, oh, wow, what did I do back then?
We need the worst awards. Oh gosh. I think we need to do this. We need to definitely do
the nexties.
Yes. Oh gosh.
Oh, man.
That'd be the birth of something wonderful.
Yes.
Okay, so you guys do that, Jonathan? Oh, sorry.
It's not true. Always with the TM, you guys. Cara and Alan are killing me.
Yeah, they're bad. They're bad. All right, so
I can't get the image of him under a waterfall with his hair. I also actually want to put together a bunch of J-Rock quotables too. Because I think that every time you come on screen, there's just like you deliver a wealth of quotables every time. And so when I put this up for the podcast and I get it transcribed, I probably put together a whole list of things. So be prepared for that. All right, so we do have like potentially Kristen that wants to jump in, and then maybe Quetzal. So, and anybody else, maybe Alan, Cara, if you guys are interested. But then that means that I would have to ask for some vacancies on this end, and Valary, Rubina, you want to stick around? Jonathan? I think as the least diverse member of the quadrangle, I should probably be the one to go.
Okay, that's it. Nah. Okay, so I'm gonna, Jonathan, I'll go ahead and X you out, and then I'm gonna invite. I'm gonna bring Kristen in.
All right, thank you guys. Love you all.
Thank you so much. All right, Kristen, I'm inviting you in. Oops. Oh, there she goes. And if anybody else is interested in coming in, let me know. Just type something in chat, and I'll bring you on. Okay, so let's wait for Kristen to come in. I do like the fact that, Rubina, you were talking about so much, project management stuff, and Valary is right here to, to discuss that stuff too. Let me see here. I'm trying to Kristen. Yeah, Jonathan. There you go, Kristen. I just sent it over. Hopefully it comes through. I tried to do it through chat, but there we go.
Hello.
All right.
Hello again. So thank you. Mine is quick. I really just have one, and it is something that hit me way too recently while I was at this 3-day human-centered design training. And it was like an epiphany that we're not usually trying to find the right answer. There's very rarely the right answer. There's just the best idea you have now that you can test out and see if it works. And you can do a lot of things to help make sure that idea is as good as possible, like get a diverse set of people in the room and get input from experts that inform your decision-making. But most ideas come down, and I'm working on something right now where the ideas came down to people putting a bunch of stickies up on an online whiteboard. And then we looked at them and thought about them for a little while. And there's nothing, we don't have to spend weeks and weeks analyzing to be like, yeah, let's try this one. And then instead of analyzing up front, we'll just kind of work through it. And if it doesn't work, we'll hopefully figure out something better that does. But I wanted to get a chance to share that because it always is a little bit freeing to think there's not a right answer. No one's sitting back there behind me being like, oh, she didn't hit on it. What's she doing?
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, I love that one.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I love that one. And I love that you sort of did, because I think one that kind of popped in my head as we're talking is, getting outside of our bubbles and getting ideas from not just a diverse crowd in the room that have to do with this particular project, but I get ideas from just all over the place, like crazy places, and I think sometimes we have to give ourselves that freedom and say, get ideas from art and marketing and this person and that, how is advertising working right now? And that helps me make decisions about how I can make learners more engaged and things like that. And I've gotten involved a lot with design sprints lately. And like, to your point, like just get people in the room and you'd be amazed what you can create in like 15 minutes. And yeah, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be final, but it's something to work with. And we're not all sitting there staring at our screens, just trying to make it everything just perfect. And whatever. And then what we think is perfect isn't always what the learners think is perfect. I mean, I've seen courses that learners thought were great because they got them the results they needed that, instructional designers are horrified by. I mean, there was a big discussion on another social media location recently, and it went on for days and days and days, and people were just horrified about these people out there in the world that are making money and they're putting these PowerPoints up there and they're charging people tons of money and whatever. And I said, but some of those people are business people and they're actually getting these people results. And sure, their PowerPoints suck. And sure, there's absolutely no sound instructional design anywhere in it. But, so I think staying open and not getting a little too on our high horse sometimes about, our standards. And again, they're important. The research is important. The systems are important. All of that's important. But I'm just going to go a little disruptive contrarian here. But, I think sometimes we get a little so locked into that sometimes we miss those wonderful sort of, epiphanies and serendipities and whatever.
Yeah. As an example of that, I was running this, my company does professional development by the trimester. So every 4 months we have a different initiative and it's pretty loose. We usually would have a weekly meeting and I would kind of take it from there based on what people needed. There'd be an overall plan, but it was also a week by week, me figuring out, oh my God, what am I supposed to do this week? So one week I just decided to go around the weekly call and ask everyone to put sticky notes on a board I'd made with their biggest problem, the biggest thing they were facing in the actual execution of what we were working on, which in this case was business development. And a lot of the stickies converged on the idea of not having a good sense of what everyone in the company's specific skills are. So when they were talking to someone and they're like, I think Kristen might be able to solve your problem, but I don't totally know. And that was everyone's biggest thing. So right after the meeting, I took a thing I kind of half made, which was just a form for everyone to fill in with that information, connected to an Airtable that would just display kind of a website with that information. And I sent it out and I said, okay, everyone fill this out. And then an hour later, we had a solution to the thing that I would have, sat forever and been like, okay, so the performance goal here is everyone is able to state what other people in the company. And that wasn't what we needed. We just needed a thing. It took an hour. Awesome. So yeah, I think that plus the idea of a minimum viable product, like we were talking about earlier, that you can just, it's iterative. Like Cara said, at what point you can release it. It's not going to be releasable at the first iteration because you don't want to send out any confusing signals. But you can send out not quite enough and see if maybe that actually was enough. And then see what happened from there. Yeah.
Just been so much wisdom being coming through in today's cast. Now I know that Cara wants to come on and then Quetzal is in. So is it okay if I rotate a couple people out and see if we can get them in? So Valary, Rubina, I'm going to invite you back on at some point, like for another cast. It was great having you on. Great to meet you. And
thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Close that out. And then let's see here. Cara, I'm going to bring you on. And then let's see if we can get. And then this is going to be a really disruptive group.
Well, while they come on, this is my daughter's art wall behind me.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You're not in a co-working space today.
No, that's the fun of having me on here it's just a different place every day.
And there's Cara. Let's see. And Quetzal, you're going to be coming in. All right. So what do you think, Cara? Some things you wish you'd known before becoming an instructional designer.
Hey, Q. Great question. I think some of the big ones are, you know more than you think you know, especially I think a lot of us kind of, again, fall into this. I was a subject matter expert in Kindle before I even became an instructional designer. So knowing kind of that product knowledge and being able to kind of talk the same language as your SME, I think is super important. So not being afraid to use it to your advantage, so to speak, is important. And then the other one too, I swear I used to not be as vocal as I am now, but when I was first starting, I was super timid, scared to death, didn't want to upset anybody, you know, never make anybody upset at all. But knowing, and I know it's so cliche, but actually having a backbone and being able to push back is something I wish I would have done sooner in my career. Just knowing that there are a lot of people out there, and I think we've already discussed this to some length, but knowing that you can make a big difference in what you're doing if you have the right information, and being able to ask the right questions to get the right information is also another big piece of it. And then my last one, and then I'll pass it over to Q, is feel free, and again, this has been talked about too, but no one is going to take the time to develop you unless you take the time for yourself. So know that when you build something, you're asking for somebody's time and attention away from the product. A lot of times in L&D, we take money, not make money. So being cognizant of making sure that the information and stuff that we put out there is absolutely helping the bottom line, giving more kind of information about how to do better, I think is super important. But being able to own your own development is something that I totally wish I would have done sooner in life, because I completely lived under a rock the first 6 years of my career. So putting yourself out there, knowing that there's a community of people around you that support you, care about you, and have been through the exact same thing you have, super important.
Wow. So that is amazing, Cara. I want to speak to that for a second, because I almost want to change the title of this discussion now, because I think what Cara's kind of getting at is that we're not becoming instructional designers, we're ourselves and doing instructional design. So who we are comes first. And I actually really like in the chat, if everyone can put in how many job titles they think they've had under the umbrella of instructional design, because it's so much. And through all of that, you're bringing a ton of varied expertise. That's a huge part of this this specific job role. Is there's so many parts to it. So you have to keep yourself in the center of all of it, no matter what, it's you doing it. And you should be not afraid to speak your mind, develop yourself, be on your own path. So I really like that, Cara. Thank you.
No, it's awesome. Yeah, I would love to ask that question out on social media too, just to everybody out there to see, just to look at. I mean, you know, the list is endless. That's awesome. So, Quetzal, how are you?
Hey, Luis, good to hear from you. Hey, did I miss the part where you were sharing off all your life lessons?
You were. That'll be a separate episode.
Hey, come on, man. Give us a little taste.
No, I'm not prepared for that. Especially like in my role nowadays as a marketing operations person for a big learning media company. So I can't say that I don't know. I just have like, all I do is just, I completely unprepared to even think about it. I was mostly focused on facilitating and getting.
No, but I mean, I'm serious. Like everyone had to start somewhere, right? And everyone had like certain expectations. Like for me, I came into the corporate world out of college, and I had completely different expectations because of how college set me up. So when I came in, like I got my degree in instructional design almost by accident, because I just didn't want to leave college. Then the instructors there, they kept advocating more independent instructional design. So they never prepared me for what happens if I wanted to break into the corporate space, which is very plentiful in the Silicon Valley. So I ran through a lot of struggles early on, and I felt like there were a lot of things that just weren't setting me up for success. And it was one of the things every time I went back to my university, it was one of the main sticking points I kept bringing up to them. Is like, I get where you guys are trying to go here, but I feel like you're only setting up a portion of the base here. So I don't know if you've had a similar experience where you're just kind of breaking into the field right there and you have certain expectations, only to find that, the job itself is actually going to mold your role, hence some of these iterations of titles that we've been getting over time.
No, absolutely. And surprisingly, I would say that this is kind of weird, but I played in rock bands for like over 20 years. And I feel like that has been a big part of my success, is just working with musicians in like sort of creative scenarios and just doing team stuff. That has been actually a great experience for me. I didn't realize that would have any impact whatsoever on my professional life, but being able to run a band has been a big deal. But anyway, so tell us more about what you got going on.
So it's very interesting you guys brought up some of these titles and how things have been working. So for those who haven't known, it's been a while since I've been on, because I had been working as let's see, what was my latest title when I was in the Bay Area? It was an education specialist. And then my company didn't love me back, as well as my entire training organization. So we all got our walking papers. It kind of worked out serendipitously for us because we were planning to move out of the area anyway. So that led to a large stint of, being just being a Mr. Mom for a while, which was fine. I loved spending the time with my son during those times. But then I ended up picking up a job, and they said, hey, we're looking for a learning experience designer. And they explained to me everything that's a part of it. It's like, well, we develop training for all of our planners and so forth. I work for a financial company, and they're a fiduciary, and they have all of these planners, and they need to onboard them on all sorts of things, whether it's like Salesforce training or any other sort of training that comes about that they need to get right away. So I figure, okay, it's a little different than what I had at my last job, but there are some similarities. The team, I think, was the main sticking point for me to go in. They were a great sort of team there. The interesting thing is, as I've been working here, I've been kind of seeing a little bit more of the same, where there's expectations that, here comes a learning project. So I need to have a design document, and I need to set expectations. I need to have all these sorts of things that you would find within a traditional sort of project. It turns out a lot of them are like quick wins, to put it nicely. My manager actually said, look, I'm only expecting C+ work out of you guys because we have this much amount of work that needs to get done. And we want to knock these things out, as opposed to spending all the time kind of getting it right. So it's always an interesting sort of thing when I hear these sort of aspirational stories of these great sort of projects that are coming out. And the reality, especially in my space, where you just need to get just enough to get it out the door, the minimal viable product, as they would say when I used to do agile methodology. So the way I equate that to is like you're a chef, and you could do these very sort of unique sort of dishes that are specifically catered to your clientele, and you can get it exactly right to their particular taste. Maybe they're vegan, maybe they prefer certain sorts of other cuisines, but you can do that, and you could tailor it right there. The job actually is looking for more of a burger flipper. And throughout my career, there's more times they're looking for a short order cook, where it's just, look, there's a menu of things that we want to create. We want you to be able to be flexible enough to do those. And sometimes we're not even asking you to do that. For example, my day today, as was yesterday and the day before, is actually headshots. When I got here, one of the first things they taught me how to do was to take pictures of the entire company on my area here and retouch their faces for headshots. Now, I don't know where that kind of equates with instructional design, but that was just one of these things where, well, your team has access to a camera and you guys are willing to do this. So yeah, let's just add that to your thing. So while I appreciate the new role that I have, it's like somebody saying, hey, we're going to give you a truck. And now we're going to tell everybody that you have a truck. So yeah, good luck with that.
No, I mean, is that universal, you think? Like for everybody, is that your experience? It's just that whole concept of C+ work, just getting it out the door. I love the analogy with, being a chef or and a cook. But I'm just wondering, is that something that never tell people you have a truck? Nice one, Alan. But is that pretty much universal, you think? And is that a good thing? That everybody that people need to know that you don't expect to have to do like A+ work. C+ is going to get you through there. Anybody?
Well, I will say it's for me, my whole career has kind of been built on fix it here sort of thing. So I know that I'm in company that has done very wonderful sort of things, and I just aspire to those moments when I get to really kind of stretch my legs in those sort of spaces. So I might be the minority in that case.
No, I don't think. I actually think that. I mean, we've definitely touched upon the idea multiple times in this conversation. So I think that's really, really interesting. And like especially kind of having a role where you're not expected to do, I guess. Or would that be wrong to say you're not expected to do the best you can, or that or how would you actually phrase that that you don't have to actually put out like incredible work every time, but that must be comforting as well.
I mean, it depends on how you look at it. Like I could see in the case of my team, they were undergoing a merger. So now you have one company merging with another company. There's different sorts of learning styles that are there. One of them is Sunnyvale based. The other one is more Boston based, and they have different sort of work ethics, and you're trying to get everything out the door, and there's only so many people that are there. So you got to work with what you got. I see the advantage of doing that, where you'd rather have something there than nothing at all. But I also see on the other end where, as you're putting this stuff out, you're concerned about things that would make me stop in my tracks. I'll give you a great example. One of my last projects I had to do, I had to take a PowerPoint. Somebody gave me a PowerPoint, and I had to put it into Storyline. Sounds familiar? Now I get this PowerPoint, and somebody already created objectives for this, and I'm looking at the objectives, and I'm stopped at the first word, because it says understand. Now, I don't know if anyone else is a stickler about this like I am, but understand and know are two of the weakest action verbs when it comes to creating objectives ever. If you can say understand, that means that there's another action underneath that you can put in there. But I was so hung up on it that I was stuck there, just staring at that one word. Like I couldn't proceed forward until I kind of pulled myself out, messaged my coworker, and he reminded me, look, we just need to get this out. So I had to force myself to ignore the objectives and put the deliverable out. And it went against every sort of fiber in my being, but it's what I had to do. And I could see you, Cara, kind of like, yeah, I would you have stopped right there, Cara? I'd love to know.
It's tough. It's tough when you're not supported and your manager says, I don't care, just get it out. So I don't fault you at all, Q, but yeah, I probably would have ran my mouth a little bit about that. But probably wouldn't have got me anywhere, but I would have ran my mouth about it.
I've already run my mouth on the fact that we have to put periods on bullets for everything. And it's just because they use an AP style guide. And I told them, we're not AP, that's for news publications, but hard and fast. So I can run my mouth, but at some point you got to pick your battles. And that's one of the things that I would tell an earlier version of myself. Pick your battles. You're holding on to them. I'm shaking my fist on the other end of this email that you can't see, but you just got to pick your battles.
Oh my gosh. Okay, you got to pick your battles, and I'm gonna have to close this one out. It's been an hour. This has probably been the most entertaining TLDcast I've ever experienced. Thank you everybody for coming in. It was a lot of fun, you guys. I really appreciate you spending your time here. I'll be putting this out like as a podcast, and also the recording will be up afterwards. I'll also do a nice little blog post this weekend. And I just want to thank everybody for participating. And it was just great to see everybody. Great to see you guys' faces. And thanks again for being a part of TLDC.
You need to play us off with one of those guitars, man.
Okay, hang on. No, I'm not going to do that right now. Come on. All right, but I will play this music, and have a great day, everyone.